Joe, do you think that the Prime Minister is still up to the job?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Mark. I think in Boris Johnson, we have a Prime Minister who delivered Brexit, somebody who's put Britain at the forefront of global issues, and someone who's delivered the most successful vaccination programme in the world. And obviously, we've seen a big success with the booster programme. We also must remember that after 11 years of power, Conservatives have been in power for 11 years now. We have a fast-growing economy that's recovering now from the pandemic. We've got wages going up as well. We've got jobs going up. We're doing really well as a country. And I think a lot of that is down to Boris Johnson's leadership. And it's been a very tough 2 years, and it's not been easy. Mistakes have been made. But overall, I think the Prime Minister has made a lot of the right calls, particularly July. You were just talking about the fact that obviously, compared to the rest of Europe, we have a lot fewer restrictions. We're one of the freest countries in Europe when you compare us to a lot of the other countries. That's because the Prime Minister made the right call for us to unlock in July, and because of the vaccination programme being such a big success story. So I think Boris Johnson has not lost his mojo. I think he's got a lot more to give. We've only seen the start of what he's got to give in terms of leadership. He's only had 2 years, so I hope there were quite a few more years, personally.
Well, I do agree with you fully, Joe, about the 19th of July. I'm like a stuck record, giving credit to the Prime Minister for sticking by his libertarian principles, lifting restrictions, cases fell, and England in particular are the envy of Europe when it comes to where we are with COVID. So you're so right to point that out, although hasn't some of the gloss of that been taken off with today's press conference, which goes very much against freedom?
I think we still have a freedom-loving Prime Minister in Boris Johnson. I'm not particularly a fan of face masks, nobody is, but at the end of the day, wearing a face mask is the right thing to do to not just protect yourself, but more importantly, protect those around us, particularly those who might be more vulnerable.
Great. And then you brought out that zinger about how great masks are. Well, look, you're entitled to your view. I fully accept my one is perhaps a minority one, Joe. We'll agree to differ. But Benjamin Loughnane, do you think BoJo's lost his mojo?
Well, I think the thing that proves it most is the first thing that Joe mentioned was Brexit, which was 2 years ago. Boris had this amazing energy when he went into the 2019 election. He had great energy when he was the Mayor of London. He had great energy during the Brexit campaign. He was known for being this great, energetic character. But over the past couple of years, it seems more and more his energy has been zapped, he's been drained. And I think we all have, to be honest. The past couple of years of lockdown and all of the restrictions and everything that we've been dealing with has been psychologically taxing on the entire country. And I think Boris is bearing some of the brunt of that. He looks like half the man he was before. But I do think Boris is still in there somewhere, and I'm asking him to come back out and be the Boris that he used to be when he had the BoJo mojo and he had the energy and the character and the charisma and the positive leadership skills where he didn't just go on the back foot and say, oh, OK, we'll have another lockdown, or, oh, OK, we'll bring back masks, or, oh, OK, I've been told that there's this new variant by these sort of scientists or weird ghouls who have told him that he's got to lock the whole country up again, and he goes halfway and says, oh, we'll just bring the face masks back. We need to get that positive Boris back, the Boris who actually believes in things and goes out and achieves them and does them and stops listening to all of these people who are surrounding him who don't really have the same ideas that he does, I think, deep down.
Look, Joe Porter, I have been grateful that the Prime Minister has been in post in the course of this pandemic, because I'm convinced that under any other Tory leader, but perhaps someone like Jeremy Hunt, who challenged Boris for the leadership of the Conservative Party, or Keir Starmer, we would have had more lockdowns, more economic damage, and a higher non-COVID death toll. So this is definitely not a Boris bashing fest. I'm also a huge Democrat, which is why I believe that he's got a strong mandate to run the country, an 80-seat majority. And he also got Brexit done, which was a triumph and places him in the history books. Joe, this guy's got talent. But when it comes to a lot of bread and butter issues, there are concerns. What about the migrant crisis? This is a Prime Minister who is not able to police our borders and keep the people of this country safe.
Well, when we voted for Brexit, we voted to take back control, and that includes taking back control of our borders. And I agree, the government needs to get tougher. They need to get a grip of our borders. And on a very personal level, I think Priti Patel's had a very tough job, and obviously Boris has as well with this issue. There are no easy solutions, but we need to get tough because it's what people voted for. They expect our borders to be controlled because we're a sovereign country, and that's what you naturally expect to happen. I think one thing I would also say with Boris Johnson is obviously, I think we've had this economic model, haven't we, for quite a long time, where a lot of people in working class areas have felt left behind. You know, we've had low wages, low growth, low productivity. And what I like about Boris is he's trying to change that. He's trying to spread opportunities by levelling up. He's trying to increase wages, trying to increase opportunity and productivity for a lot of those people who felt left behind. And I like the fact that he's doing that, and that we've got all these new Conservative MPs in red wall seats that are trying to spread those opportunities out, because I think that's really important going forward, because that's what people voted for. When they voted for Brexit, they didn't just vote to leave the EU, they voted for things to change, and that includes the economy, obviously includes immigration, it includes lots of different things like, you know, being out there on the global stage, being big on all those global issues like climate change, for example. And that's what we're seeing under Boris Johnson, someone who's injecting that energy and that passion, someone who's very patriotic. You know, one thing I love about Boris is he loves this country. He's very patriotic, and I want to see more of that from Boris. I want to see him, that belief in this country. I want him to do more of that going forwards. But it has been a tough few years. I hope that, you know, as we come out of this pandemic, you know, we're nearly there, we can see more of that Boris.
Joe, you've got a smart haircut. You've won the competition for Best Christmas Jumper, and you're super articulate, quite the opposite of the Prime Minister this week, addressing the Confederation of British Industry. He lost his way during his speech and then waffled on about Peppa Pig. I mean, this is a concern, isn't it? We can't just gloss over what's happening here.
Well, don't forget Peppa Pig's one of Britain's great exports. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Peppa Pig. I know a lot of people have probably come on here and said that, but I think it is a great British export. It's something that we should be proud of. And yeah, I think everyone makes, you know, a speech where they slip up occasionally. It happens to people. It's a human thing. I mean, it is regretful, but people slip up sometimes. And I think what people like about Boris, he's not one of these slick politicians like Tony Blair or David Cameron, you know, or perhaps even the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. He's different in his own sort of style. You know, he's quite a human sort of guy. And I think people can relate to that. You know, as a Conservative activist, you know, as a Conservative councillor, I go out campaigning on, you know, on a weekly, monthly basis, and I speak to people out there across the country, not just here in North Staffordshire, and people love Boris. He's so popular. People, you know, have got such affection for the guy. You know, wherever he goes, he pulls in the crowds. And I think what we've got to remember is this guy, he can win elections, and, you know, he's proven the last few years that he can make tough decisions. We just need him to crack on with delivering that agenda that Conservatives were given in 2019, which is to deliver post-Brexit change to transform this country into an even greater place.
Benjamin, here's the rub with Boris Johnson. He is stubbornly popular, and you underestimate him at your peril.
Yeah, Boris, I think, you know, is far better than some of the alternatives. And there's, you know, very few people currently who are in contention for leadership who I would want to replace Boris with. But what I want to see Boris do is be more like Boris and less like all of the people who surround him, who push him into certain kinds of ways of governing. He needs to embrace that spirit that he had 2 years ago and when he was the Mayor of London, and push on with that rather than bowing to pressure from Europe and America and the people around him in cabinet. But on the matter of the migrant crisis, this is something which he has failed to do anything about, not just for the past few months, not just for the past year, but for 2 years now. This has been raging. This has been going on up and up and up in terms of the figures. And people have been saying constantly, you need to get a grip on this. And he hasn't said anything. He's done nothing about it until the other day when we had that terrible tragedy in the Channel. And it was only then that he sort of woke up to it and realised, this could turn very nasty. This could, you know, spell the end of my premiership if I don't get a grip of it. But it's only because it's in his interests now that he's decided to get a grip of it. I don't think he's ever really cared about the issue. I don't think he cares much about immigration as a whole. I think it's something which he regards as a non-issue. But he really needs to get a grip on this, because if he doesn't, it will condemn his legacy. He has great potential to be a great leader. He has that Churchillian characteristic which could be channeled into doing some really incredible things. But if he misses this one key thing, the Channel Migrant Crisis, it could spell the end for Boris. And I really hope it doesn't happen.
Benjamin, I'm going to read between the lines and assume you don't want a Labour government at the next election. And with that in mind, if a future Conservative administration were in peril, do you think there's anyone better than Boris that could replace him? If Boris is the problem, what's the solution?
Well, I don't want a Labour government at the next election, but I also didn't want one at this election, and it seems to be what we've got. Unfortunately, it's just a Labour government dressed up in blue, doing all the same things that a Labour government would have done otherwise. So a Labour government would have done exactly the same thing on the migrant crisis. It would have done exactly the same thing on lockdown, although perhaps worse, but still, nonetheless, the same policy. It would have pursued all of the same policies on tax rises, on all sorts of different things. So what have we actually got? What's the distinction? We need this Conservative government to be an actual Conservative government, not a Labour government in disguise, and then we'll be happy. But no, I don't want a Labour government. Either way.
And Benjamin, what's your prognosis for Boris? Does he make it to the next election, or will he be sunk by a big scandal? What do you think is going to happen? Let's get our crystal balls out. Does he fight the next election? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, he seems to have this almost Trump-like effect, where the more scandals that pile up against him, the more he comes out smelling of roses, because you know, when there's so many different things being railed against him at the same time, nothing really ever sticks. I think the only way that something would bring him down is if there was one clear scandal which was drawn out and didn't go away. But at the moment, it's things that, you know, wallpaper, 1 week, and then the next week, something else, and then something else, and then something else. I think something like the Channel crisis, if it gets worse, if more people die, and if the situation is not solved and it escalates in tensions with France and we start to see this posturing from Macron, his electioneering, anti-British remarks and sentiments, I think those sorts of things are where we start to see the cracks. The main thing is if the polls flip and the red wall MPs start to think they're going to lose their seats. Because the moment he starts to lose support from those red wall seats, the thing that sort of swept him into power, swept him into his landslide victory at the last election will suddenly disappear, and he won't have the same impetus as before.
Very briefly, Joe Porter, brilliant to have you on the show for the first time. Let's get your crystal ball out as well. What do you think is going to happen? What's the prognosis for the Prime Minister?
I very much hope that Boris will lead us into the next election. In fact, I'd like him to lead us into the one after that. I'd like him to have a full 10 years in power, because I think he's got 10 years that he's ready to give. He clearly wants 10 years, and I hope he's given that, because he's got a lot more to give. I think he's delivered Brexit, he's obviously delivered a strong economy, and he's led us out of this pandemic, or he's leading us out at the moment, and he's got a lot more to give. He just needs to be given the chance to deliver, and I hope that he's given that chance, because he is delivering for the British people. He's delivering the kind of change that people voted for when they voted Conservative in 2019.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.